Because for the record, I was in 1998, not 1988, so I'm gonna give myself 10 more years. Oh, I got it. All right, well, welcome everybody, both remote and in person. I'm going to be, this presentation is going to focus on just what's right around the corner, spring wildflowers. So again, it was a very general presentation when I was asked to come up with a topic, and obviously there are so many, everything, you know, obviously flowering plants are the largest group of plants right now on the earth. So, well, there's a lot of flowering plants. So how to pick them? I basically, we're going to be focusing on things that are going to come up on the valley floor, starting now all the way through April, May. I snuck a couple midsummer ones in there just because I like to talk about them. But for the most part, we're going to just focus on that. And so again, I'm not a working botanist, so this is the part about being recorded. I may make a mistake or two. I know there's a lot of the classification of plants, a lot of plant families have moved around, and things are always moving around because of DNA now and molecular botany. But again, most of this is going to come, these are all my own photos. I've been part of a group here called the Siskiyou Plant Explorers, which has been put on by the NPSO Siskiyou chapter. Started right at the end of COVID. It was a free 4-part botany series, and I just had to join because it was something that just looked great. It was free. It was best. I like that too. And we just decided, let's keep this going. We didn't want to stop after a month or two. So now we're 3 years into it. We've got 75 people that come along, and we call ourselves amateur novice botanists because, again, none of us are really career working botanists. We've had some people join the group that are retired from a science degree or research. So it's been great to have them. But most of my career has been horticulture, agriculture. And but I started botany thanks to the Emerald Chapter Society up in Eugene in the late 90s, 97, 98. And going to like the wildflower shows up in Clyde. So those were a good introduction. But when I came down here to Southern Oregon, the Siskiyou Mountains, everything was a lot different than the Pacific Northwest. So we're going to go through some of that today. What else can I share really quickly as a primer? I think that's really it. So so when I go out and we go out into the on plant walks and you know into wherever we're looking, whether it's the oak savanna or the forest woodland, I'm always thinking about a lot of different things. One, I'm thinking ecology. So I'm thinking about the habitat, you know, the moisture, the aspect, the slope, all those types of things that are going to affect which plants we're going to be looking at. I love to think about evolution a lot, and just in a broader sense, you know, when do these plants arrive here? How did they get here? And, you know, how do these lineages work? How do they relate to each other? So this is just a simple phylogenetic tree that I put up here just to get us thinking about, again, the phylogenetic tree. You can look at the bottom, starting with the, anyway, obviously, you always want to start at the bottom of the tree line or branching pattern. I always want to start at the base, and then you're going to branch out from there. So this is a really simple tree that, you know, again, I mostly start with bryophytes, the pteridophytes, the ferns, orchids, the bryophytes, the mosses, and liverworts, and hornworts, pteridophytes, ferns, horsetails, a few other ones in there. And then our conifers, and then of course we get into our flowering plants. So, which I think roughly 150 million years ago. So relatively new on the scene, but older than humans. So of course plants they're autotrophic. They don't need they can make all the food and everything they need just from sunlight. So, but of course, you know, we have a close relationship with them, and we're responsible for a lot of dispersal of plants around the earth now. But again, or you can look at it on the tree to the right is a little easier to look at as far as, you know, the first plants being your algae coming around the ocean. There's even, you know, now we can look at the cellular level and trace back the origins of the first cells when bacteria and plant cells were able to photosynthesize and become, photosynthesized red algae, green algae living in water, and our brackish waters. Plants started to slowly come on the land. And then, of course, we've got plants in the early stages, no flowers, no seeds, just not even really vascular, non-vascular plants without roots, just living on substrates like mosses and liverworts, which we still get to go experience and go out and look at. And then as we move up into ferns, we start to see spores. And, the interesting thing about those early lineages, like the mosses and the ferns and horsetails, they evolved with water for reproduction. So they have flagellated sperm that can swim in water to find the eggs to reproduce. So that's all happening out there without insects or wind or anything like that. But they need the water. It's a great time to go out and look at those those early lineages of plants, because everything's nice and green right now, and they're doing their thing. And then, of course, you get up into the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. So let's see if I can get this to go. Okay, let's click on the phone. All right, real quick primer. I still like basic botany. I still always have to go back to the basics. So again, you've got your stamen and your pistil. Those are the two main reproductive parts of the plant. And it depends now. Things as plants evolved, it became more fused together. But this is a really basic figure when the plant parts are still separate, like in the Ruaceae family. Some of those are like monocots, flowers. So the stamen, so they've got the pollen. You've got a filament and anther, and then the pistil, which we call, that's the one that has the ovary and where the eggs are at the bottom. And I think of that as pistil pachymama and stamen. I don't want to put it in. I know we use male, female, but that's just for the reason of just the reproductive parts still being termed male and female. We're more concerned just with actual individual parts and what's happening. So, of course, you've got your pollen moving from the tip of the anther with modern flowers by insects or wind that's moving onto the tip of the stigma. And I guess a lot of people, I always thought, pollination just happens like really quickly, pollen just lands on the tip of that stigma, but there's this whole other process where the pollen has to actually grow a tube and go and find and move the sperm cells all the way down to the ovaries and then pollinate or fertilize the ovaries and the egg cells to create a new plant. So that is, basically, that's the start of all these generations of plants that have flowers. And it happens over and over again. So this is just a little bit of a close-up look of that. Of course, there's really interesting. I always think of, at the seed stage, it's basically a living embryo. And you've got your embryo, which is the smallest part of the seed once it's fertilized. You've got your seed coat and then the endosperm, which makes up the majority of the seed is just your endosperm, which is just your stored nutrients and everything that embryo needs to survive. Because as we know, seeds can survive for a long time in a state of homeostasis, really low metabolic activity in the seed, until they're ready to germinate, until the conditions are right. Which again, the conditions would be light, moisture, oxygen's a big one too. You don't think about it all the time, but seeds require oxygen. And the big one is embryogenesis, and the ability for the plant to actually germinate. A lot of times comes down to breaking down the seed coat, which there could be a lot of inhibitors, whether they're chemical inhibitors. Sometimes these seed coats need to be broken and nicked to germinate. So anyway, but you can see the pollen grain and the sperm nuclei. So I don't get too much into that, but it's basically you've got haploid cells forming a diploid seed. Yes. Yes.
So that studying folks are saying mostly when you turn away.
Okay, I'll stay in one place.
That's hard. Yeah, like I know it's so hard. Okay. But it's very common because they're 40 people.
Okay. All right.
You're not leaving. You're just like,
I'll stay closer to the mic. Okay. And I'm trying to talk loud. So hopefully
You're doing. Hold on just a sec.
I'll stick next closer to the mic. I won't wander around. The other thing I want to talk about, and again, this is going to be really basic today, just get to know the inflorescence, which are the patterns on the right. They're very helpful when you're going to identify different flowers by the inflorescence. Those are going to be tied to the botanical families. And so this is a really good way to just start grouping and classifying plants in a general way. So I'm not going to go over each one, but we'll look at them in real time and talk a little bit more about those inflorescences. Well, those are just patterns. And there's just some fun words on the left-hand side, like the peduncle, which was the stalk of an inflorescence. But then you got a pedicel, which actually holds up just the individual flowers themselves. And I guess I don't have a good example of petals and sepals, but you've got petals, and then sepals below the petals, and bracts in a well-behaved flower. That's a great picture of, I didn't take that one. That's just a great picture of pollen grains. I'm always fascinated. I believe and one thing that was talked about in one of my recent botany courses is that species can be now ID'd just by their pollen. Every species has a unique pollen grain. And so you can just see how quick it is. Maybe family, okay, secondary Darlene. That might have been a stretch. There is a layer on the outside of the pollen that's called exene, E-X-E-N-E. Really interesting. It's just one of the toughest, hardest, layers kind of on plants. As we know, pollen grain, they can survive for thousands and thousands of years and still be, still be looked at and still hold their form. So I'm not going to talk about this. Okay, not that either. We'll cover. We're not really going too deep into evolution because we got so many flowers to look at. So we'll start with just the early ones. We're going to talk about Liliaceae. Those are your monocots. Again, going back to some of your early evolution of plants. Everything's really nicely well divided, and you can look at the plant parts really easily. So this is just the underside of the petals. This was taken on table rocks. Last year was like, I don't like the word super bloom, but it was a great year for the Henderson's fawn lily because we had a lot of rain and cool conditions, and it was just all over the place. This was just up on upper table rocks, and I think this was March even, maybe late March, early February. So again, Liliaceae, everything's going to be in threes, so you can see so I always like to take pictures of both the top of the plants and the underside. So the underside we're looking at, you can see the three sepals and then the three petals. And in Liliaceae, oftentimes the petals and the sepals look alike so much that you'll hear a word called tepals, where it's questionable whether they're petal or sepal. And the other one, we'll get into the leaves, but yeah, everything's in threes, so that's the easy way to do this. So when I was doing this, I was like, how can we learn something? We could just look at plants. I could talk about their name, and all that. But I really wanted to group these plants together by their family. So again, even the stamens that you can see here, if you count the stamens, they're in threes. There's gonna be 6 stamens, and it's a nodding flower. A lot of that gives probably I'm just going to go off on a limb here and just say that some of these early flowers, when they come out, you see how wet and cold it is in these conditions. So they oftentimes have a waxy kind of feel to them. They shed, they really don't absorb water. They kind of shed water really well. And something like this Henderson's fawn lily, it always is kind of nodding downward. So it's got some protection from the weather when we're getting the snow and rain. This next one is over in Jacksonville Woodlands. This one comes up in April. Gettner's fritillaria. That's really endemic lily that grows right in the Jacksonville woodlands. Probably there's some little populations of it around the valley, but I'm only become familiar with it in the Jacksonville woodlands area as it comes up. There's also Fritillaria recurva, and checker lily. So they're going to be coming out soon, and they're all going to have this kind of same form to them. So a lot of your native lilies, were all taken in the Jacksonville woodlands all on the same day in April. So if you really want to just get into the fritillarias, Jacksonville woodlands is a great place to go see them. These are all pretty much growing typically in your oak, pine oak, ponderosa pine oak habitat. This one's further out towards the Serpentine out by $8 Mountain area. I go out there a lot, so you start to see some different fawn lilies out that way. Not sure if this is the giant fawn lily or I believe it is. There's a clown fawn lily too that can be a close lookalike as well. But this was just a nice one sitting by itself in some rocks over there. Okay, and then getting into other members of the lily, we're still sticking with flower parts in 3. This is Trillium ruvella, or the brook trillium. Just one of my favorites to see out there. It's just one of the more pretty, I don't know, just more unique looking. Again, the trilliums are going to be growing. This one, brook trillium, it likes to grow in moist, wet kind of areas. I always see this one growing in kind of wet, grassy areas. This was out by the Gasky Ranger Station. Close up of that, of course. So again, you can kind of see even the end of the pistil, the stigma has 3 parts to it. You can see the 3 sepals and the 3 petals and the 6 stamens. So everything's in 3s. This is the just the wake robin, the giant wake robin trillium. I don't know if this is true, but I believe that once these plants get pollinated, they start out white and they turn red or purple after pollination. Someone also told me that trilliums are pollinated by ants. I'm not sure. I never actually pay that much attention. I don't see too many pollinators visiting this plant, so it very well could be pollinated by ants. And there's our Tolmii, the cat's ear. Of course, that's all over the valley floor coming up soon. Same thing, we're still in the same family, Liliaceae. So you can see a lot of, hopefully, patterns here when you go out and look at these plants. I'm going to stick with Liliaceae just for a few more minutes because we've got also the Calcordis uniflorus, which is one of my favorite ones. Grows up in the meadow above $8 Mountain, above the boardwalk. It's called Days Creek area up there, and that's I don't see this one all over the place. So it blooms fairly profusely up in that area. Naked cat's ear. And it oftentimes accompanies the camas. And also our Camassia pomache or the purple camas. There's different species. So that's one thing that we do as novice botanists is we haven't really gotten down to the species level. We're still working at the genus level with a lot of things. It just takes time to learn all this stuff and to really get it in your mind. We'll take time and key something out that's really interesting when you go out. But if you're just starting out, if you can just start grouping plants by their family and their genus, that's a good place to start. This one is going to be both the starry Solomon seal on the right and the I guess I'd call that the plume Solomon seal, the Myanthemum racemosum. Okay, so racemosum. I guess it's kind of hard to tell that's a racemose inflorescence versus the starry Solomon seal you can see on the right. The inflorescence is much different between the two. They are the same genus, Myanthemum. I guess it's a good time to talk about Liliaceae too, because monocots are also kind of known to have parallel veins, which could also be an indicator, not all of the time, but most of the time. So. Hooker's fairy bell, it's another one with parallel veins and really indiscriminate, discrete flowers that hang down below it. This one's oftentimes in a more woodland environment. And then we don't want to forget that actually our onions, the onions are in the lily family too. So we'll look at that really quickly, how those are kind of related. This one's hard to tell because it's not open yet, but it's the Allium amplexans, the narrow leaf onion. This one is actually not a native. It's, I believe, the three-cornered leek, which is growing in abundance over by Gasky, but I don't believe it's a native onion. It's a non-native leek. The other thing with Liliaceae too is they all are mostly going to grow from corms or bulbs, so they don't really have fibrous root systems. They typically have a big fat bulb at the bottom. Not that we dig any up, but if you did, that's another commonality between this family. And just another allium that I look at a lot, which is the scythe leaf allium, or the which is out by Table Rock, $8 Mountain. So this one is really unique because you can see at the bottom there, you can see the inflorescence being Liliaceae, again, parts of 3. Most of your flower parts are going to be in parts of 4 and 5. So if you just start counting petals on this, and it can kind of lead you down that path. But the actual leaf itself is very discreet, and it doesn't almost look like it's attached to the plant, but it's definitely scythe looking, and there's usually just 1 or 2 leaves coming out from the base of this plant. It grows mostly on the serpentine. But again, just another really pretty Liliaceae. Something a little bit closer to, because again, you're going to have floral parts in 3s, is the Iridaceae, which is the iris family, which Darlene was talking about, the grass widows that are up. They come up, they're one of our first flowers to come up on the valley floor. The leaves are mostly going to come from the base, and they're oftentimes grass-like. Their sepals and petals aren't like a lot of the lilies, where oftentimes the sepals and petals are going to be more distinct colors. They may not be oftentimes, in lily and in Liliaceae, a lot of times the sepals and petals have the same color, even sometimes the same shape. Siskiyou iris there too as well. So that is our Iridaceae. So those are very closely related too. Getting into some of our native orchids that come up in the springtime. This is the Calypso orchid. This one comes up more towards May, June, and you can follow the bloom all the way up into the middle part of summer, even up to 5,000–6,000 feet along the Siskiyou crest, and still find this in bloom as well. But we see a lot of this population. We go up to Grizzly Peak every year, and this is typically where we see it. There's a lot around the Siskiyous, around where I live in Williams too. I find this one quite often as well. Orchidaceae, it's a very unique looking flower. It is very symmetrical. You can cut it right down the middle, and it's going to look kind of the same, the flower on both sides. This is the California lady slipper, and there's still plants out there that I'm finding after 3 years of going out on summer weekends mostly. And first time I met this plant was last year for the first time. It just blew my mind because it is just a gorgeous local orchid that we have here, the California lady slipper. So this is out again by $8 Mountain. Okay, and then of course the Ericaceae, the heath family, which are going to be mostly trees and shrubs, but they're out right now. That was something that we always get to look at, our local Archostaphylos and Manzanita madrone. These bloom very early they have the flower structure to do so because again, the reproductive parts, the ovaries, the stamens, and the pistil, everything's really well protected inside this flower structure. Urn-like flowers, and they typically hang down, so it can be raining like it does all day today, and our manzanitas are all blooming, and it's not gonna damage them very much. So they're very well set up. This is the Visita or Viscita. I don't really, just say in Latin how it is, but it's very viscid. It's very sticky. In the cold, when the heat comes out, this plant, the white leaf manzanita, of course, has a whiter leaf than the green leaf manzanita. Green leaf manzanita only typically grows 4 or 5 feet, where the white leaf manzanita could get 6 feet up to 15 feet tall. And also the flowers, if you're looking at them in the springtime, they have a really viscid. They're very sticky, exude a sticky substance. So, and we have other like Eastwood manzanita and hoary manzanitas. Those aren't as prevalent, but the white leaf manzanita and the green leaf, if you start paying attention to those two, you'll start learning quite a bit. And we want to that, and of course our lovely madrones, they bloom early in the year too. Huge nectar source for our local valley. They just provide so much nectar and flowers, just one tree alone. Still love that exfoliating bark. Of course, physiologically exfoliating bark on manzanita or madrone could be adaptation to like shedding off surface, diseases and things like that, keeping the outer surface clean, free from fungal disease. So it could be an evolutionary mechanism why these plants go down to they exfoliate their bark down to a really thin layer. Of course, we call these, in the summertime, these are like water cooler trees. You can just go up to a madrone when it's like 90, 100 degrees because it doesn't have a bark, and the vascular system, so all the water flowing up and down this tree is right below the surface, so it's so cooling. It's like to the touch, so it's a great way to cool off when it's hot out there or on plant walks. Just go hug a madrone tree. And these are up right now, Ranunculaceae. That's our buttercup family. These are going to be out right now. This is one of our first blooms. We already saw out at Jacksonville Woodlands. It's probably blooming at Table Rocks right now. Some of our earliest plants. This is the Western buttercup, occidentalis, I believe. And you can really tell, but Ranunculaceae, now we're getting into 5 petals, numerous stamens, oftentimes upwards of 20 to 30 if you want to take the time to count them. But yeah, Ranunculaceae is one of those common ones that when you look at it, the multiple stamens is oftentimes, there's a lot of plants with 4 or 5 petals that don't have a lot of stamens like that. So that might clue you into this plant family a little bit. Again, very well suited for this weather. They're very waxy, very glossy. They wick water very well. This is our Southern Oregon buttercup, which is an endemic to Upper Table Rock, which we got to see last year growing. It's one of the key features is, again, flipping it on the underside, has that kind of burnt orange red underside to the petals. So it's another fun endemic to go out and look at. So again, I won't get into endemic plants. We don't have time for that, but just know that we live in the Klamath Mountains. When they come over the Oregon border, we call them the Siskiyou Mountains, but they're still part of the greater Klamath geologic province. And we've got a lot of endemic plants because of the geology here, which is great. This is what Darlene brought in. This is the Californicum, Lomatium californicum. So now we're switching plant families. We're going from Ranunculaceae, which is 5 petals, multiple stamens. We'll get into the Apiaceae, if I can find a better picture of it. It was cold last spring. I didn't get a lot of good photos. when I look at lomatium, I always love to look at the bracts on the underside of the apiaceae. So let me get to a slide where we can see the umbel inflorescence. So you can see apiaceae is oftentimes, it used to be called umbelliferaceae, I believe. But apiaceae is got that umbel inflorescence right at the top of the plant, sits basically an umbrella-like pattern branching out. And the fun part is tracing it all the way down to kind of, you start at the base of the stalk. If it's a compound umbel, that pattern will do that. You know, it can do it multiple times on one plant. So as you follow it from the peduncle to the pedicel, that's how you can know that you're looking at apiaceae. Another one thing that is oftentimes a good indicator of apiaceae is the new leaves when they come out at the base have a sheath to them to cover kind of the base of the leaf. So it's another one as well. Apiaceae and Ranunculaceae, some medicinal plants there. I'm not going to talk about that, but a lot of poisonous plants. So they're good. Those are good plant families to learn if you're into eating plants, which I don't do. We don't really do that in our plant walks, but I know some people are always interested in it. But get to know Apiaceae, get to know Ranunculaceae, because there's a lot of toxic plants, and there's also some really great plants in that family. Just really get to know them very well. I think that's just Utriculatum, which grows around table rocks, the shorter one. Oh, this is the fun lomatium. This is the Howell's lomatium, which is endemic, grows out by the Serpentine, just gnarly looking leaves. I love everything that grows out by $8 Mountain because it's just roughing it out there on the Serpentine. And so the leaves are just real prickly on this one. And it's got kind of an interesting pattern, the veination on it. Another apiaceae that comes up is the Sanicles. I don't know if the people call them the footprint of spring. Is that what you'd call that one?
That's one of the names, yeah.
Okay, so this one, sometimes I get fooled again because I'm not a professional botanist and I'm just out there looking at these things. Sometimes I get fooled into thinking that I'm looking at a Sanicle, and it can be confusing with lomatiums, but they're very look similar. There's a couple different species. If you crush one, it's got like a cilantro smell to it. So oftentimes smelling these Sanicles is a good way to tell the difference. Some people call them snake root, I believe is another. They've got some really neat veination happening on the undersides too. But again, they are apiaceae, so you've got an umbel sitting at the top of the flower. So that's the apiaceae plant family. Moving on to Saxifragiaceae, which is going to be again usually 5 united sepals, but 5 free petals. Sometimes in saxifrages, the petals can be like thread-like or just like really like stringy. This is our prairie star, Lithophragma, probably Lithophragma glabrum. This grows all over the place in the oak savanna. They grow up on table rocks. Great place to see a lot of these plants in table rocks, March, April. Another one up on table rocks in the saxifrage. So you can see the 5 free petals on that one. If you really got in there close, you can see the 5 free petals in this one. This is Macrantha, Macranthes intergrifolia, I believe. And that one's also up on table rocks. There's 3 or 4 Macranthes species that grow here that you can see just all over the Rogue Valley. They like to grow in basically wet kind of meadows, early spring, closer to the valley floor. Now we can really see up close those 5 free petals on the Saxifrage family. And again, that's just a close-up of Macranthus. And another one that is an interesting one, again, is the Howell's Saxifrage, Macranthes howelli. This one usually grows just on the wet rocks out towards the western Siskiyous. Um, I didn't take much time to key this one out, but I believe that's what it is. It grows kind of in these seepish areas. I just had to put my pen up for scale because it is just a tiny little thing. Saxifrages are small, so they're fun to photograph if you like little things. This is another saxifrage. These are called miterworts. I believe this is this one was taken up by Grizzly Peak. So you can see, I guess now you can, on that one, you can actually see that the sepals are united. And on the other one, you can see the 5 free petals. So I didn't really have a good picture of the sepals, but you can see so the sepals are the green underneath the white petals. So again, you can see that they're all fused together. It's hard to tell unless you take it apart and start to count them, just actually see that they are fused together, the plant tissues themselves. Everything good? Okay. All right. Moving into Valerianaceae, which we've got a lot of ones that'll be coming up. Plectritis comes up in springtime. And those are going to also have 5 petals that are, so this will be the opposite than saxifrage, because saxifrages are 5 petals that are not united. Valerian is going to be, a Valerianaceae family plants are going to be united petals. I think I have a maybe picture of that. So yeah, there you go. I pulled one of the flowers off just to show so I just pulled the petal off on that metal picture. And you can see those are all together in one clump. So some of the like Sitka valerians, those are going to grow a little higher elevation in the woodland forest. The Plectritis, oftentimes you'll find lower elevation out in the Applegate Ridge, Table Rocks. Just, 2,000-3,000 feet is where we see this one growing quite often. Again, it likes moisture, so it's going to be growing out wherever there's moisture. You'll find Valerianaceae. Most of those species do like moisture. And opposite leaves, even though you can see, you can see opposite leaves, the way the leaves are situated on the stem. Another kind of giveaway, because it's not a lot of plants that have opposite leaves, less than alternate, I'd say. Hey, okay, and then the borage family. Of course, these are already up this year. Again, 5 united petals, so very similar to valerian, but just I'll show you the inflorescence on this one. It's a little different, and they don't have most of them aren't going to have opposite leaves. But this is our houndstone that's coming up right now. These are already up and blooming out in Jacksonville and probably up on Table Rocks as well. The thing I think I want to show you, the seeds are called nutlets. They form these really distinct kind of seed pods that are basically, you can kind of really see I love this picture because you can see the fertilized ovary and still the pistil at the top of that flower, and then you can see these nutlets with the mature seed that's starting inside to mature. So you're getting some different stages there on the houndstone. This is just a stick seed, another one that grows more in the forest. Be closely related. You can see how similar the flowers look between those two, not in the same genus, but same family. And then you get into like the fiddleneck and Amsynchias, and they're Boraginaceae. And this is how I think of Boraginaceae a lot of times, because I go to look at them and they're oftentimes very hairy too, and those little hairs are very sharp and prickly. Borage has a lot of, it just bites back when you want to go pet it. So it's just and it's oftentimes what we call like a Scorpio sign. That's a horrible picture on the left, but I'm trying to show how the inflorescence it curls under like a scorpion tail. So we call that a Scorpioid sign. And that's kind of another typical inflorescence of Boraginaceae, where it unfurls like that. If you you see, I see that in Hydrophiliaceae too, in the water leaf family. So it's not the only family that does this type of inflorescence, but there's not a lot of flowers that kind of curl under and then the way they open is like that. So, yeah, but you can still see the 5 united petals on that very clearly. Oh, the cocoon. This one is a very, I don't think it's very common. This is just one that I took out by, this is the same Boraginaceae. So this is a plant that I didn't know what it was, but just because of those hairs and the 5 fused petals, and if I look maybe at the inflorescence, it just gives you clues. So hopefully, like, that's the whole idea is you can be in a desert environment, or you could be on vacation somewhere else, and you could look at plants, and once you start to recognize families, then it can get you a lot closer, because all your field guides and plant lists oftentimes group plants by families. Silly edges, things just really, and then you can really see the scorpioid kind of inflorescence on this on the popcorn flowers. There's many species of those. I tried to key those out, but again, there's a lot. They're pretty nuanced. So this is the Pacific waterleaf. There's another one. This one grows up in the Jacksonville woodlands. But you can see how these are all related. This is the berry leaf. Just a nice close-up that I got of a pollinator getting in there. It's like a wasp trying to get his head in there. Even though the other thing that this family is kind of known for, well, now we're in Hydrophiliaceae, but so sorry, I skipped ahead there. So you can see a lot of similarities between the borage and Hydrophiliaceae. They're very fuzzy, furry, and they've got fused petals. The big thing with Hydrophiliaceae, they exerted stamens, so they come way past. They're like 2-3 times the length of the petals often, which makes it really easy for pollinators. But he's really getting in there for the nectar, I guess, sitting down at the base. He or she. Okay. Well, this is a Nemophylla. I love this. I found this one last year at Table Rocks, and kind of new to me. And it's just I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that this one was in the Hydrophiliaceae family. It makes sense now that I looking closer at the pictures. Again, you can see those kind of hairs that are guarding around the sepals and the fused petals. You see the exerted stems, but this is a tiny little plant. I think this is the parviflora. Parviflora oftentimes is assigned to plants that are very tiny. Hey, we'll take a little break and we'll look at just a shrub. This is Fremont's silk tassel. Silk tassel is it's dioecious, so you have male and female plants. You have male flowers on one plant, and you've got female flowers on a separate plant. So here's an example of both the male and female flowers, which I believe, again, I'm not a botanist, but I think these are both the male and female on separate plants. This was taken up on Table Rocks. Evergreen silk tassels. Of course, we've got the coast silk tassel. And, there's a serpentine silk tassel. Again, it's and when you get into shrubs, there's not a lot of opposite leaf shrubs. So this one is a good one to look at because it's got opposite leaves, and it's evergreen. So you can, and it blooms like January, February. And of course, once the female plants get fertilized, there's the seeds. Oh, we're looking at Fabaceae. This is a local weed, astragalus, and this one can be indicated by the. It's actually got 5 fused petals. So this one up here is called the banner, and then you've got 2 petals called the wings, and then you would think the keel is just one, but actually the keel is 2 fused petals. So technically it's got 5 fused petals. But just always remember if you see the pea family, and oftentimes we can identify peas later in the season by having their fruit, their pods, like a bean pod. But I love the banner wings and keel to kind of look deeper in there. The keel is what protects kind of the reproductive parts. So the stamen and the pistil is kind of folded up in there. So you can't really see the internal parts without really digging in there. Just a quick time check. Do I have about 20 more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, I'll keep going. Hopefully everybody's more familiar with the lupins and that are also in this family, common pea family, local pea family one. That's going to happen. Hey, now we're getting to the Brassicaceae. This is Western bittercress, which I don't talk to enough working botanists to know, but I mean, the Oregon Flora lists Western bittercress as a native, which I don't know. It's everywhere. But Brassicaceae is this one is all over the place. And there's definitely these little cresses that are not native. But if you look at the Western bittercress, this is probably it. Some people call it shot seed because it's so the Brassicaceae has 4 petals. It's called crucifer, which is a cross. Just think of 4 petals, and a silique, which is the seed pod that it makes. So you can see those long slender seed pods that the flower will slowly mature into. And the silique has an interesting kind of physiological mechanism where it kind of curls from its tip back to its base in kind of a fairly violent way that it actually projects the seeds out into the world. So that's why they call this one shot seed, because and gardeners probably know this one too, because you're oftentimes reading it, it's shooting seeds up at your eyes. But siliques are a good indicator of Brassicaceae family as well, besides the next flowers we'll look at that'll have the 4 petals, which is more be more prevalent right here in this Nuttall's toothwort. This one was up already. We saw this at Jacksonville Woodlands last week, so this was a fun one to take just to be able to look at the toothwort. It comes up really early in the season. And I guess I didn't do a very good job, but it's got like linear leaves. We call these cauline leaves. The cauline leaves grow off the stalk of the flowering stem. So those are more like linear, but then look at the base of and these are kind of, they spread by their rhizomes, which are kind of underground stems. So if you look away from the plant a couple inches, you'll find a whole nother leaf pattern, but it's actually part of the plant of the toothwort, and they're more palmate, I guess, would be the kind of the pattern. This one just they're not always modeled like that, but this one just happens to have that modeling of the leaf. But they're on the same plant, and again, another Brassicaceae. 4 petals is usually a good giveaway for that one, although we'll talk about another plant family that has 4 petals. Just here's another good example of one. So you can see the basal leaves are oftentimes different than the linear leaves up near the top. But this is our spring toothwort. Comes up early in the spring. And another one that you see in the mustard or Brassicaceae family is our Erebus or rock cress. They're all over the place. So rock cresses obviously are more prone to growing in rocky areas. So if you're interested in those, there's a lot of endemic rock cresses that grow here. This one was taken out by $8 Mountain. And again, you can see the pubescence on the leaves, just a gnarly looking plant. Again, the conditions out there to be able to, the hairs on the leaves, pubescence are oftentimes an evolutionary adaptation for water stress and be able to hold water for longer periods of time. And it also kind of protects the outer layer of the leaf tissue from getting burnt from the sun. definitely more prevalent desert plants, but some of these rocky outcroppings are pretty much like the deserts of the Siskiyous. So rock cresses are going to be in your Brassicaceae family too, mustard family. This one's actually not called a silique. It's got a different term to it. That's called I don't know if I'm saying this right. Silical, I believe. Okay, silical. So this wouldn't be quite like the linear. They're more like flattened seed pods. But these are Brassicaceae as well. Okay, and then getting into we're switching now to another plant family called Carafolaceae, which can oftentimes be a little tricky. This is Stellaria media, little star chickweed. Carafolaceae is opposite leaves, and it is 5 petals, but if you look at the picture, Carafolaceae always throws me off because the petals can be really deeply notched, almost all the way to the base of the petal. So oftentimes when you're counting it, sometimes I come up with 10 petals instead of 5, but Carafolaceae is, they're just fused. You just got to be real careful and trace it all the way back to the base. 5 to 10 stamens, 5 sepals, and 5 free petals, which we can really see in this photo. The freeness of the petals that are often notched, which I would agree with, because I don't have any photos of them, but there's a lot of sandworts that you'll find if you start going out that are in this plant family too, have a pretty similar looking flower. And then of course there's a lot of field chickweeds and hairy chickweeds of that nature. Another one that's in the plant family, I wish this is kind of past its prime, but the Bell's flycatcher, sorry, catch fly. Anyway, I love finding this plant. It typically grows just, I don't see big populations of it. There again, I'm not out there doing surveys professionally, but just going on our hikes and things, it's oftentimes just growing by itself within a few clumps. And the Bell's catch fly is another one that is, it's always just got this really sticky, kind of gooey, kind of covering to the leaf when you go up to it. I don't know if that's actually an adaptation to catch flies or not, but I don't think it's carnivorous in any sense, but it's in the same family nonetheless. Oh, this is our starwort, and I just threw this in here because I don't have anything. Primulaceae is where the leaves are going to be pretty much basal, which means that basal leaves oftentimes just grow from the ground at the base of the plant. And yeah, the petals and and you can see the petals are often they kind of form this pattern where the sepals, which are those linear kind of leaf-looking leaves, oftentimes just they sit right in between the petals to make that kind of unique pattern. So they're kind of like they alternate the petals in their pattern when you turn them upside down. And then I'll get into Pulmonaceae. This is oftentimes, these flowers oftentimes either have like a trumpet shape or like sometimes they call it pinwheel kind of look to them, like they're kind of spinning. And this one is the one that grows up on the Jacob's Ladder. We see that one up on Grizzly Peak. Blue anemone. So you can see also, so the Pulmonaceae would be another one, I believe, where you do have 5 sepals and petals, but oftentimes you will have multiple stamens on these plants. I don't know if this one's still in the same family, but some of our phloxes would be also in this. It's slender. And then, of course, the violets. I think, you know, they're so unique looking, and I don't really need to go too much into the physical characteristics of violet, but they're oftentimes going to be in your woodland area. At least this one is. This is the stream violet. There's another yellow violet that's fairly common called the pine violet. Those are the two most common ones that we see that are yellow in color. Yeah, oftentimes the largest petals oftentimes just right at the bottom of the inflorescence there. I love just the markings for the pollinators. This is the Shelton's violet. This one is out by $8 Mountain. Yeah. That's the Hall's violet. The Halls and the Sheltons have really unique leaves. They're very deeply serrated. So they're a little different than like, your stream and the pine violets that are more entire or whole. Simple looking. They're very deeply notched. You can hopefully see the little bit of the leaf on the Hall's violet coming up. Wedge leaf violet, another one that grows out with serpentine. You can see why they call it wedge leaf. The leaves kind of just go straight up like a little wedge, and they oftentimes are more pointed upwards. Pretty one. Okay, and then another one that we're going to see a lot of out there coming up is our, I always want to call it Collinsonia, but it's Collinsia, and that's our blue-eyed Marys, or I used to do the Table Rocks Environmental. We used to call them shirts and skirts, but blue-eyed Mary is a common name for them. There's grandiflora and linearis. If you want to get into the species, it's often based on the shape of the leaf. But this is very common in the oak woodlands, early spring, March, April. So you'll see this one coming up often. Oh, and then my favorite flower, Tenella tenella. I don't know. How many people know Tenella tenella? One person? Nobody else? Tenella tenella? I love this plant. It's so easy to, Latin is so hard, but when it's Tenella tenella, it's like, it's so easy. It just rolls right off the tongue. And it's this tiny little plant. You can just see my grubby little fingers there, just how small this thing is. It was so hard to get a picture of this one, but it's in the Plantagenaceae family too. Again, really, Plantagenaceae always has kind of like this kind of face looking at you, but such a great pattern. I love the way that it's the color pattern on this one. So the Tenella is in the oak woodlands, comes up springtime, March, April. So.
She loves it.
Oh, sweet. Good. This is the Snow Queen. It's coming up. It's up now. This is more in the forest environment, but this is an early one that comes up here in the springtime in the forest environment. One of the first ones to come up. Veronica. Phrymaceae. So yeah, just get. I mean, that's also plantain family as well. Going backwards. Okay, get into some other plants. Okay, so let's get into Phrymaceae. I couldn't get a good picture of this one. This one's too small, but this one's the out by Rough and Ready. It's the Placus Douglasii. We call it purple mouseleters. A little tiny plant. Again, only a couple inches tall, but just such a unique pattern to them. Phrymaceae, again, has a really unique kind of Mickey Mouse kind of ear looking kind of flowers to them, kind of like plantain Scrollophyraceae. They used to be kind of all lumped together. Some of these got split out. The monkey flowers are in that family too. So you kind of see these patterns in the flower structure. There's a lot of upright and creeping ones. Yeah, I didn't really have a whole lot. We could do 20 minutes on Let's skip over that. But we will take a break because we have alders. Alders are male and female, and these are, of course, the male flowers coming out right now. These are the catkins with their multiple stamens and throwing pollen all over. And again, wind pollinated, I imagine I imagine there's probably some insects that also maybe gather pollen early, but it's so early in the year, we really don't have that many pollinators out. But these catkins are really made for wind pollination just because they're elongated and they throw out so many stamens and so much pollen. So that's just so there. Alders. Oh, then we're getting into Asteraceae. So these are going to be a really distinct plant family. These are very highly evolved, where everything starts to get fused together. It's our more recent plant families to evolve on our planet. So they're really, I would think, evolved for insects, because we look at just, a single flower and we just think, well, that's just a flower. But when you're looking at something like this, this balsam root, it's hundreds of flowers. I think we can maybe see that a little easier. So you've got disc and ray flowers. So in this one, let's just look at the ray flowers are along the edge, and you can just see the ray floret at the top is oftentimes all the flower parts are just going to be more closer to where the petals are. And then the disc flowers are right in the center of the flower. And they are they're a composite flower of hundreds of flowers. So they're very attractive to pollinators for that. I think on this one, you might be able to see a little bit of the ray flower, kind of a little bit of the reproductive parts that are sitting right at the base of the petals. Before this one, so I think this is Crochidium multicale, spring gold. These come up all over the place. They're up right now, and then of course later in March, April, May, when it starts warming up, some roots start coming up. This is the serrated. There's some interesting balsam roots that grow up by $8 Mountain on the Serpentine, the Serica. They start to hybridize, and you see ones with highly serrated leaves and kind of like a grayish, powdery look to the leaves. You'll see those all over, but this one's more common around this on Serpentine, especially again, they go a lot to $8 Mountain. So you see a lot of them kind of with serrated leaves. You see some with like the entire leaf margins, and they're kind of like, they're just all kind of, I assume some of them are hybridizing. Then you could group, we could do a whole class on Asteraceae too, and I'm not qualified to do that, but this would be one that would be, so you could have aster flowers that are just disc flowers, and you could have flowers that are just the ray flowers, which oftentimes the hawkweed tribe is just the ray flowers. So here we can see just the petals and the floral parts without the center disc. Oftentimes think of like hawkweed tribe too. Another one is that they kind of the ends of the petals, they cut off, they're like strap-like. So if you pull off a petal, it's like they don't taper to a point. They're oftentimes the same width at the base versus the tip. They oftentimes have a little serrated edge at the tip there of the petals, and that oftentimes will get you into the hawkweed kind of area of species if you're trying to figure out Asteraceae. Oregon sunshine, which again is a very common Asteraceae. It's got the disc and the ray flowers. One thing that I use, I think it came from the flora, but it kind of proves true almost every time if you flip it under. So the sepals are obviously all together, or I guess you would call that the involucre or the phyllaries, because we're talking about Asteraceae. So Asteraceae has its own language. Sepals oftentimes are fused into what's called an involucral bract, and those are called phyllaries instead of sepals, and they're oftentimes in like a little cup that the disc and ray flowers sit in. So the phyllaries are oftentimes what you use to identify species. So the Oregon sunshine is pretty cool because the tips of the phyllory, which is that cottony green, almost like the sepal, it matches up with every petal. So when you turn on the other side, like every petal matches up with a little point on the phyllory, right? Exactly. So the same number of points on the phyllory are the same point that you'd have on the petals. Bigelow sneezeweed. I guess that'd be later in the year, but I just threw it in there just. This one comes up and it's in the Asteraceae family, which I just learned doing this presentation. I didn't know. I would have guessed. I would have thought maybe it was in a different plant family, but unless something's changed, it's in the Asteraceae family. This is our western coltsfoot or Petasites. You'll see this blooming right now in the riparian areas, low elevation of our valley. So it's a fairly sensitive riparian plant. I don't see big populations of it. No, that's the sawwort. This is another one that more grows up maybe at the Siskiyou crest. That's in the Asteraceae family. The dentate leaves on them, so the margins of the leaf are they don't go they kind of the points go more straight out than up. Well, and then I just have to throw in Pearly Everlasting because it's the end of the year and it's the last thing that we all look at when we go on our flower walks. So this is very late in the year, like August, September, October, but it's a great Asteraceae at the end of the year. And you think I would end my project there, but I won't. I'll just keep going. I got some fun ones at the end, just Garryaceae, the oak family, of course, the beech family. They are monations. You got male and female flowers, separate. So monations would be mono, same plant, different parts of the plant. So you find male and female flowers on different parts of the plant, which the females are usually in the leaf axil and the male flowers are hanging down like that. Brewer's oak, I believe. I don't know, just assuming by the size of the leaf. That one, oftentimes we have fun finding that one in unique places in the Siskiyous because Brewer's oak is kind of an endemic for Siskiyou oak lovers. The gentian pluritosa, which is the Klamath gentian. This grows up above where I live, Bigelow Lakes. So this is kind of one of those unique, rare endemic species. Gentian has got the 5-fused petals, and this one's really unique because it's just got all this little fuzz growing in it. This is Solanaceae, just one that's growing up on the ridge. I don't want to forget about pond lily. It's in its own plant family. Of course, it's not going to be blooming right now, but it's another. So these are kind of like I ended this with just like plant families that might only have one species in them, so they're easy. Like our California bay laurel it's the only species in that family, from my understanding, and the Lauraceae family that would be growing native in the Siskiyous here. Can't forget about our currants and gooseberries. Of course, gooseberries have prickles, currants do not, but they're all in the Grossolariaceae, that family. This Caseae family are mistletoes that are parasitic or hemiparasitic or semi-parasitic, because they do have chlorophyll, so they can produce probably some sugars from the sunlight, but they also have Historia, which is a term for plants that are parasites that basically they root right into our mostly white oak trees. But they do have inconspicuous green flowers that you can go look at right now. Snyder's lettuce. Yeah, that's our dwarf woolly meadow foam. It's one that we always try to go look at. It's got more of that fuzz kind of in the center there. And that's what brought me here to Southern Oregon was the BLM Table Rocks Environmental Education Program. I was 20 years old, and it's my first job out of school, and it was a great job. I got to hike Table Rocks every day, twice a day, for a couple months, and it really got me into the Siskiyous. So if you want to join us on our hikes, I've learned a lot. This is just sharing what I've learned in the last 2 to 3 years. Again, I'm not a professionally trained botanist. These are just things I go out and we do together as a group. Whether it's good or bad, there's something about positive affirmation from other people when you're out there. So a lot of it's just about, hey, I know something you might not know, and it's just this whole wonderful sharing experience when we're out there. Again, it's always nice to have folks that are more well-versed out there to maybe get a little deeper into you know, the species or some of the research out there. But we have such a wonderful area here. I just really want to see a botany program come back to SOU or RCC. And so it's just going to take a lot of public interest and a lot of, you know, it's going to take a lot of citizen science to really, you know, I think justify, we've got a really unique flora here in the Siskiyous, like no other place. I'm just so thankful to call this place home and feel like there's just endless opportunities to learn from the plants here. So if you're interested in joining, if you live locally, we go out on Saturdays, usually 2-3 times a month during March, April, May, June. Then we start to taper off by August, September, October, to once a month. But it's free. If you want to email siskiyouplants@gmail.com, you can get our email list. Our hikes are usually 2 to 3 miles in length. It usually takes about 6 hours to go anywhere. And we stop for lunch most of the time. Not on time, but we do eat. But yeah, we've learned so much, and just want to thank again, the Siskiyou Native Plant Society for just really getting this going and kind of starting all this for us. So really wonderful thing to have in our community. So thanks for joining me. And hope you learned a little bit.
So there's a question in the chat.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
Let me see where we can find this. Where do you see the blue
Anemones.
anemones blooming? What timing?
Sure. They mostly grow in the shade of the forest. You don't see them in, I've never seen them in sun exposed areas. Grizzly Peak, June into July is a good time to go see that particular plant.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions from anybody in the room?
That was delightful. It was a great preview.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yep. Get out there. The best is go out and see for yourself. So, and join us, and we'll do it together.
Lots of things on the Zoom.
Lots more?
We're all excited for spring.
Yes. That was the whole intention.
Yes.
There's a lot of topics I could have chosen.